Good morning. Welcome to Adult Formation on this beautiful spring day. We are going to get to the scheduled programming in just a moment. I've got a couple of announcements. First and foremost, it's very important everyone know for the next 2 weeks, we will not be having adult formation. So next week is the church breakfast for what is next week? Palm Sunday. And then of course the following Sunday is Easter. So that's the big to-do. The 16th is the next time we will be gathering, and Doug Jones will be talking about the troubles, the past troubles of Ireland. And so that's going to be an intergenerational event with the youth who are going to be going to Ireland and Scotland over the summer. So Doug Jones will be talking about that. While those of us who are going to Scotland will be in Glasgow that morning. So we just ask for your prayers. We will be going on our Scotland Heritage, Reformation Heritage trip starting on April 10th, and then we'll be coming back the next week. So just ask for prayers about that. But the important part is no adult formation for the next 2 weeks. April 16th, we meet again. Y'all will be here while I and the Scottish folk are in Scotland. Another announcement, we had a few weeks back a mental health first aid training. And we had about 6 participants, and it was really wonderful, very informative. And those 6 of us are now trained in mental health first aid. We will be having another training session on April 22nd. So this time it's on a Saturday. It's from 1:30 to 7. So snacks will be provided and a light dinner will be provided. It's $75 a person. So please come and get trained in how to help with first aid in a mental health crisis. Any questions about that, please let me know. And those are all my announcements. I'm going to start with the word of prayer, and then I will turn it over to Kay. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, what a beautiful day you have created. What a beautiful world you have made. What beautiful lives you have blessed us with. May we use all of those as tools to further your kingdom. May we use this day to share your love. May we use this world, may we work with this world to be the kingdom that you originally intended. May we use our lives to share your will for all of creation. In the name of the Christ we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Casey Dammit. I'm currently session member. I'm co-chairing the new member committee. I'm a choir singer. Mentioning choir, I can report from Ben and Olivia and the choristers in New York City. They're having a blast. I'm getting hourly updates from my daughter. I am in my other kind of life. I am a clinical herbalist. I'm currently in graduate school finishing my master's degree in clinical herbalism to formalize this line of work. I also have a PhD in agricultural sciences and have worked in that field for a long time. And I'm just excited and very grateful to be here today and to share with you a little bit of the things that from my line of work, but also from my line and from my personal faith, my personal, how I weave things in my mind together. And the title, The Healing Powers of Food. So Pat was already worried, I'm going to tell you to stop drinking coffee. I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking coffee. I actually said that coffee is actually, and in the clinical herbal medicine world, coffee is an herb that we use for healing as well. So there you go. I'm going to paint with a very broad brushstroke here today, and more approaching this from a very visionary, philosophical, and faith-based approach of how we really relate to food and with food, and sort of bringing us back to a relationship with food that then in and of itself provides healing. I'm not gonna give you some prescription diets or anything like this. We're really more looking at the big picture where we may have gone astray a little bit with our relationship to food, and I'm just giving you an invitation and some ideas that you may want to ponder and take along the road a little bit. So with that being said, I would love to invite you to join me and start this all with a short meditation. And you can stay seated, just maybe sit up a little taller so that we have a straight spine. That's always great to allow the breath to flow, the thoughts to flow, and the spirit to flow. And if you do feel comfortable to close your eyes, I invite you to close your eyes. If you don't, then I invite you to find a focal point somewhere in front of you, a little bit down, right? So that you can really focus on your thoughts rather than watching me or focusing. With that, let's just begin together, joining ourselves in breaths, breathing in through the nose, a long breath. And then open the mouth slightly, sigh it out. Do this one more time, inhale. And then notice where your hands are. They are comfortable somewhere on your lap. And I invite you to, in your mind, go back to the last meal you had. This may have been breakfast, or if you haven't had breakfast yet, maybe it was dinner last night. The last time you put food in your body and drink in your body. And just quickly bring up in front of your inner eye, what were these items? What were you eating there? And then ask yourself and answer silently for yourself, which plants were part of this meal that I had? And this may be easier, or this may be a little tricky if we had something out of a box with lots of ingredients. Which plants were in your meal? And which animals were part of your meal, if you ate animal? And then bring to mind, if you have localized, if you have noticed some plants you were eating, bring to mind, what does that plant, that actual plant, look like when it grows in the field, in the forest, in the garden? And if you find you're having trouble and say, I don't actually know what a coffee plant looks like, that's okay. Just take note of that, okay? And do the same with the animal. That's usually a little easier. Bring to mind, what does that living animal look like that you ate or you ate part of, right? If you ate bacon, well, looking at a pig, if you ate turkey bacon, then it's going to be a turkey. And then continue this questioning and ask yourself, what do I know about the way these plants were grown and these animals were raised? And if we're going to ask a succession of questions, and if your answer to these questions is, I don't know, that's okay. Take note of this, right? Notice. Do you know where these plants were grown? Were they grown close by? Were they flown in from a different country or from far away? Were these animals raised close by, or were they raised, again, somewhere far away? Do you know how these plants were grown? Do you know who grew them? Do you know if they were treated with insecticides and herbicides and other pesticides, or were they grown organically? What was the agricultural way of growing them? What do you know about the people who grew these plants and cared for them? How were they treated? How were they paid? How were they living? What do we know about the animal we ate? Was it outside? Was it spending its entire life inside? Was it fed quality food? Was it cared for with love and respect? Was it crammed in with a lot of other animals and probably not big enough space? How were these animals slaughtered? With dignity and respect and gratitude, or in a very stressful way for them? Again, just take note. If the answers to all these questions is, I don't really know, don't judge yourself, just take note. And then take a last final moment and just express your gratitude to these plants and to these animals and to the people who grew them and raised them and cared for them and brought them to your plate. You experience that food you ate with a little bit of gratitude. Just take a moment and just wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, move your body a little bit, take another breath and open your eyes again if you feel so inclined. So thank you. Thank you for this experience. If somebody would like to share maybe later what this was like, I'd love to hear it. If not, keep it with you. There's these handouts I have. There are similar sort of like exercises that just little prompts that we may want to take home as we do this. So I have a lot prepared, and I probably skip over some of the things. I just always love to prepare more than we actually get to, just in case. I want to see how things unfold. So why is there, you may wonder why Matthew 22 at the bottom, right? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, the idea is, and Rebecca, if you would please go to the next slide. I give you the bottom line of my idea and my talk in the beginning, and so then you can decide on what you want to really take in and what not. I personally think and believe that we have gone a little bit astray in how we relate to our food. And this is not something to sort of put shame on ourselves, but to just notice that we as a society, especially over the last 100 to 150 years, we have put ourselves collectively in a space of disconnect, right? So and I unfortunately wasn't here for Jacob's talk about nature, but I'm sure you touched some of this. So we have this notion of connecting with nature and going into nature, which I wholeheartedly agree with and wholeheartedly support. But it's kind of ironical because we are nature. And we have created a way of living and a way of life that all around makes us forget often enough that we are participants in nature and that we are of nature. And I believe that when Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself, I personally, in my heart, believe that Jesus did not just mean our human neighbor, but that Jesus meant our plant neighbor and our fellow animal neighbor and all neighboring life that we share this earth with. And why do I believe this? Because his ministry was a traveling ministry. He and his disciples, they ministered in nature. They slept outdoors. They slept on the bare ground. They put their tents up. They ate and received from nature and they gave back to it. And I believe that there is more to this than just our human nature and just our human neighbor. And we have sort of developed this system where we somehow put humans a little bit on a pedestal and we make ourselves superior, better, more than, right? Whereas and that causes this cascade of what we're also seeing, how we disconnect from food and how we interact with food. If we pull ourselves back and see ourselves as an equal member of this web of life, then we enter into a very different relationship with all living beings and all living neighbors on earth. And so if you see up there, I'm into trinities here, right? So plants, animals, and land. These are the big three of how we really interrelate and interconnect. And I didn't put human up there because, well, where are we in? In which one of these circles are we in?
Animals.
Right, in the animal circle, right? I mean, just biologically, taxonomically, that's where we belong, in the animal kingdom. So this is what we're part of. And all of this, in a healthy, balanced system, we all interconnect. And we don't just take and consume and take off the land and take off the plant, the other animal, but we also give back. There's a reciprocity with gratitude and respect happening. And if we remember and reconnect to that relationship, I think that is where we're going into automatically creating food systems and changing food systems to a way of where it really becomes healing, because we're engaging with connection. Then there are these levels of how do we relate to food, with food, on a very individual level, on the community level. So how do we feed those in our community and in the neighboring communities? And how do my food choices affect those in my community or in my neighboring community? And then on the going back to the planetary level, right? How do the way we interact and connect to food, how does that leave an imprint on the planet and may actually change things around?
Climate's changing, like in California, tons of rain, where's our avocados?
There's absolutely, that's a great point to make, and I wish we had all the time to go into this, but this is what you're getting exactly to the point, Prue. This is all interconnected, right? So the key word here is that's kinship, and that's what for me Matthew 22 really is. The message for me is kinship with all of our kin, and reconnecting to plants and animals as our kin, rather than as something that we are superior to and we can take from without ever giving back to. Okay. So next slide, please, Rebecca. And then there's another one of these beautiful Venn diagrams. All of this happens individually, communal, and planetary on a physical level, right? There's very physical, there's hard science, what happens in our bodies when we take in a certain kind of food or a certain kind of drink. It happens on a mental emotional level, right? My daughter was just texting me this morning from New York and said, well, I had the choice between crepe with Oreo or an omelet with tomato and avocado. And I chose the omelet because I knew I would feel really awful after eating that crepe with Oreo, right? So there's food really, and I was like, well, good for you, thank you, you learn. So there's a level of what food does with us on a mental emotional level that is also related to the physical level, by the way, right? Our mental health and our physical health are not separate. They all happen in the same organism. And then there's the spiritual level, which is absolutely important to have in mind, right? What is the spiritual quality of a food we're eating? And I'll get to that in a little bit. So next slide, please, Rebecca. So before we start, and I don't want to spend too much time on all the bad things, but just bring this into our minds, this disconnection that we created, what I mentioned earlier, has caused what we're seeing right now in our day and time. I call it an epidemic of dis-ease, and I deliberately spelled it like this, right? And the big dis-eases we are battling with in our time, and we're seeing in numbers that we've never seen before, and the numbers keep creeping up. So here sort of I made some big categories: chronic heart disease, everything that is associated with heart health, cardiovascular health, metabolic syndrome that packs in diabetes, type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all of this together. Cancer, in all the various forms of cancers there are, right? Neurodegenerative diseases. My father-in-law just passed away from Parkinson's disease, right? Which led me down a rabbit hole of doing some research there. Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease, endocrine diseases. Again, I'm including here thyroid diseases, hyperthyroid, hypothyroid, right? These are big, almost every other person I know has a thyroid issue. Fertility is part of the endocrine disease. This is something we're seeing, and it may not be so much on our mind. We are having a crisis in fertility in this country, in male reproductive system and in female reproductive systems, right? And the numbers are going up and up and up. Mental diseases, big umbrella term again. So this is sort of like some of these, what we're really working with. I'm not here to talk bad about modern medicine. I'm immensely grateful for the blessings of modern medicine. I think we have wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tools that modern medicine is giving us, and to really care for one another. When it comes to chronic diseases or bigger disease pictures like this, I'm excluding cancer because modern medicine is that's what really is on the forefront of treating cancer. But we have other modalities, like, for example, clinical herbal medicine, what is one of my modalities, where we can support somebody who has cancer to help with side effects of cancer treatments and things like this. What modern medicine struggles with is really going to and treating what is that actual underlying cause, what we call the root cause of where this all comes from, right? So we're good at putting on, giving a medicine and giving a drug for something, and it's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on, right? It patches it up temporarily, but we also need to make sure we understand where is this actually coming from, right? And so I put some keywords down there. So we have related with all of these are things like microbiome imbalance. Just a quick raise of hands. Who's familiar with the word microbiome? So the microbiome is something, you may be familiar with the word microflora or gut flora. That may be something you've heard, right? So the idea here is, so I'm standing here in front of you. I'm not a single organism standing in front of you. I'm standing in front of you with my billion of bacteria and viral friends that live outside of me and inside of me. And I need them to stand here in front of you healthy and alive, right? And it's all about, like so often in life, it's all about balance. So we need these, we exchange, we literally on a genetic, I worked on plant genetics and genomics, so I'm a bit genetics nerd, but we exchange genetic information with the bacteria and the viral world, right? And this is a co-evolution. And so in our gut, you may have heard that of our gut flora, right? That's what we call in modern research, this is the term microbiome, it's more used for that. And what happens if in a healthy body, this is in perfect balance, right? But if we eat the wrong foods, are exposed to too much stress, are exposed to environmental chemicals, none of us can flee from them, unfortunately, they're all around us, right? Then that affects the balance of these bacteria living inside of us. And so some of them, sometimes they're labeled good bacteria, bad bacteria. I really like to think more of some of them grow to a number that the system gets out of balance. And then what causes that? Another key term that is thrown around a lot is inflammation. And I get to that in a little bit because there's inflammation per se isn't bad. It's just the amount of inflammation that we're seeing these days, which is the epidemic. And some of that, I get to the gut-blood barrier, brain-blood barrier in a bit. So antibiotic and pharmaceutical overuse, I see a trend that doctors are more and more hesitant, thankfully, to prescribe antibiotics, and that there's really now a good way in on saying, no, we're not going straight to antibiotics, because as much of a blessing as antibiotics are in real true cases of a bacterial infection that our body otherwise would die from, right? If we keep prescribing antibiotics if you have a cold, and that's a virus disease, but for some reason, some people think we need to take antibiotics. What you're doing is you're killing the bacteria in your gut, right? And you may notice that I do when I've had to take antibiotics a few times in my life, and every time after that, it takes me a few months to rebuild everything, right? I suffer from digestive problems. Stress, chronic stress, permanent stress. Stress, again, biologically, stress is a good thing. in living beings. We need stress in a very balanced way to keep our systems healthy and alive. But if the stress gets chronic and we're nonstop in the what we call the fight or flight, yeah, then we have hormones nonstop being pulsed through our bodies that are only meant to really pulse through us every once in a while. And that again causes these levels of inflammation. And the last one is SAD. Now I'm asking you, do you have any guesses? You do. Do you have any guesses what SAD, that's an acronym, what it stands for?
Seasonal affective disorder.
That's one of them, very good. This one is food related. This one, that's very good. This one's food related. So there's two, it's a little bit because, and it's the official abbreviation we use in the functional medicine world for that. So Suzanne would.
Standard American diet.
Yes, next slide, please, Rebecca. So that sadly and ironically stands for Standard American Diet. And without going into detail, right, you can see the Standard American Diet, these are sort of like the culprits of if we have too much of these, our systems go out of balance. Processed, ultra-processed foods. Anything that has a packing label, and you sometimes see it looks like a whole paragraph of ingredients, and most of the ingredients, we have no idea what it is. That's our processed, ultra-processed food, right? And that's also these kind of foods where we have a really hard time figuring out, wait, what plant is inside of this? You know, what is it actually? Low quality fats, trans fats, saturated fats. I could give a whole lecture on that, but that's just something to be mindful of. Added sugars, artificial sweeteners, artificial ingredients, food colorings, preservatives, all of these kind of things where we sometimes say, I don't even know what this word is and means. A meat forward diet. Again, I personally eat mostly vegetarian. I eat some fish. I'm not here to preach vegetarianism or veganism. I absolutely don't, but the too much of anything isn't good, right? So that's just what I mean with meat forward diet. Low quality animal and plant foods. A mono food diet, which means we're eating the same things over and over and over again and not having a big variety. And then the last two terms, my professor in female reproductive systems, she coined these terms and I find them genius. She said there's no such thing as junk food. What this really is non-food junk. And then the term frankenfoods, I also love that one. That really relates to the first one, processed, ultra-processed foods. And unfortunately, there is also this new development of frankenfoods that are touted to be healthy for the whole vegan community, like these meat burger lookalikes, like the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat Burger. If you look at these ingredient lists on what's in there, you don't want to eat that, right? So again, this is just another term of this, basically creating foods but we can't even say what the source of these foods are, right? And just because, and again, I don't mean to bash the FDA, but just because the FDA puts its approval stamp on something and we're allowed to sell them in stores as foods, doesn't mean they are really foods, right? So next slide, please.
So may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you mean by non-food that it's not plant or animal based, or?
It is, it's ultra processed.
So
It is so processed.
chemical more?
It is so processed that whatever was once in there from the plant and the animal and the added sugar is the way you're eating it. It is not meant to interact with our bodies. And it also very well, indeed, also there's some added molecules and chemicals that also aren't necessarily meant to be going into our body. Yeah. So this one, don't scare, we're not having a test on this at all. Biology, physiology 101. This is just to give you a quick idea of what happens. So this is a blood vessel, okay, down here. And everything above this is our gut. This is the inside of our intestine. And these guys are individual cells. So what we have between our blood vessels and our intestine, there's a razor thin, a single cell layer of mucus that lines our entire intestine. And this is our protective barrier. This is a very genius functional way of protecting us. So you can see here that looks like somebody took some thread and sewed these cells together, right? Those are protein strands stitching the cells together, and we call that in physiological terms, it is called a tight junction. There are different ways of how cells attach. This is one of them. This is an important one. And what in a healthy functioning system, what these tight junctions do, they regulate what molecules out of the food passing through our intestines are supposed to go into our bloodstream. And in a healthy functioning system, it is those molecules that we want to go in our bloodstream, like some vitamins and minerals. And when they reach the blood, they travel all through our body, reaching the organ systems and the cells where we need them, right? What happens if our microbiome or gut flora gets out of balance and we have inflammation happening in our intestine, and we take in molecules with our food that are causing, that are toxic? What happens is they basically start chewing away on these threads, stitching the cells together on these protein strands. And then you all have seen this when a seam unravels, right? When the stitches don't hold, then the seam opens up and that space gets wider. And all of a sudden, it opens up the space that things pass through between these cells into our bloodstream that were never meant to enter our bloodstream in the first place, that are meant to pass through and be removed from our body as waste, right? And so all of a sudden, we have things in our bloodstream. And then again, by genius and by creation, we have a fantastic line of warriors in our blood. And that is part of our immune system. And what the immune system does, if something enters our bloodstream that isn't supposed to be there, they go on alert. And the immune cells start reproducing. They call others to help, say, here, we need to go. We need to just erase this body, right? Kill it. And what happens, what that is, when our immune system starts ramping up, it shows up as inflammation. Again, that's a good thing because we want our immune system to function, right? So when you catch a cold, when you have a fever, it's a good thing. We don't want to take anything that suppresses the fever because it means our body is working, our immune system is healthy and functioning and doing what it does. The problem is when we have a constant flood of things entering our bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there. Right? And then our immune system keeps going in overdrive, and then is what we know as autoimmune diseases start to happen, so that our body starts randomly attacking our own body. Okay, so just that, having that in mind. Please, next slide, please, Rebecca. So now let's turn to, we can skip over this. This was just to show you that I'm not making these things up, but that there's actually a healthy and ever-growing body of research out there. Yes.
If you have those spaces in your gut,
Yeah.
what heals that and gets them back closer together?
Oh, thank you for asking this. Thank you. Great question. You can heal this by you can easily and very quickly and efficiently heal it by changing the way you interact with food and what you put in your body. This is not, you're not causing damage forever. You can heal these junctions, you can retighten them. Yes, that's a great question. Thank you so much. Right? So we're not doomed. We have it in us, in our power to heal that. So just what does a healing, nourishing diet look like? Basically the opposite of what we saw on the other slide, right? So whole foods, I don't mean the store. I mean, can you actually tell what this plant is? This is a broccoli, this is a lettuce, right? High quality fats, low to no. So we need sugar, right? Our body needs fats, fat, sugar, salts. We just need the right quantities and the right qualities. So when we eat lots of fruit, we have natural sugar in it, right? So we don't need to add a lot of processed sugar. That's what I mean. A plant-forward diet, meaning plants are the main ingredient of our plate, and then we use the meat, if we eat meat, more as like flavoring and seasoning, rather than making the meat the whole part of our diet. High quality animal and plant food, large variety of plant foods, slow foods, and daily fasting.
What's a slow food?
Slow food is basically the opposite of fast food, meaning something that was prepared and cooked with a level of this. There comes the spiritual component with a level of love and gratitude, and with a level of thoughtfulness, right? Rather than mass producing foods that are of lower quality. Large variety of plant foods. I'll get to that in a little bit, why that is so important on a very physiological level, but also on an ecological level. Daily fasting. There are situations and there are people who cannot do this and who shouldn't do this because of blood sugar issues. And there are certain, like pregnant people should never, I would never advise a pregnant person, you have to do a 12-hour fast, right? Because they may just need to eat more often. But fasting is something that is healing on a physiological level. And if you've ever engaged in any fasting practice, it is such a wonderful spiritual tool, right? The late Bishop Desmond Tutu, he fasted for 24 hours every single week. There was one day where he fasted, and it was he said that was his key spiritual practice that anchored him and managed to get him through all these hard times. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So one of my herbalist colleagues, he's wonderful. He creates these lines of bitters. I'll talk to bitters in a moment. And what he basically says here is what I said in the beginning. We've created a system where we've disconnected and where we sort of disconnect and abstract ourselves from plants, and we have a lack of diversity of plants we're engaging with, and a lack with that of what plants we actually allow to grow. So he really says we have a plant deficiency syndrome because eating the same foods over and over again doesn't allow our bodies to interact with all these different plants. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So here are some questions to ask on an individual level. We did that in the exercise and the meditation in the beginning. What do I know about my food, right? What do I know about the people who raised my food? And then I want to spend some time on recognizing and honoring coevolution. This is a very important concept that plant, animal, and including humans, we have the times we spend together on Earth, we've co-evolved, which means, so if you look at plants have what we call primary and secondary metabolites. The primary ones are the big ones, the proteins, the fats, and the sugars, the carbohydrates in the plants. And then the secondary metabolites are the ones that we utilize, for example, in herbal medicine. Those are phytochemicals that can have immensely healing properties on our bodies. Why is that? Why do the plants metabolize these phytochemicals? They are the plants' built-in pesticides, so to speak, right? They are the plants' built-in defense mechanism if an insect wants to nibble on them, or if they catch a virus, right? They are their own healing system. And so what I mean by coevolution, our ancestors grew up nibbling on these plants and eating these plants that lived around them, which means their bodies interacted with these phytochemicals in the plants. And so cellularly, we have developed what we call receptors, which means basically ears and a lock to receive these phytochemicals, to interact with them and allow these phytochemicals of the plants to actually change and have a healing effect, or sometimes a toxic effect, right, on us. And so this is this idea of coevolution, that we're not somehow evolved alone, but that we evolve together. The way we are, the way our DNA and our biology and our cells are equipped is because of what our ancestors eat and grew up with. And so we have it in our hands to continue to engage with what are we eating, what are we giving forth, what do we keep alive inside of us in terms of these cellular interactions? What are we able to receive and to hear from these plants that we're eating, right? This is why people sometimes ask me, does herbal medicine really work? And I say, yes, of course it does, because we can look at the cellular level. We actually know what these cell receptors look like that are receiving this particular phytochemical and causing changes in our blood sugar, for example, or in our cholesterol, for example, right? Eating seasonally, eating locally, this ties into the co-evolution, right? If we eat the plants that grow around us, and if we eat the plants that grow now in the time of year we're living in, then we get automatically get what our bodies need to nourish us, okay, and heal us in that particular moment and in the particular place we're living in. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So here just some little bit of show and tell. Tell me what you see. Do you know the one on the left? Yeah, what is this one? Fantastic. Yeah, I took a run this morning, chickweed. Look that plant in the eye. I always say, how can you not see God in all her beauty and glory in this plant? Next slide, please, Rebecca. We have two more. All right, anyone recognizes this? Cleavers. And then this guy is the first one to show up in all of our yards early in the spring. It's hairy bitter cress. Yeah. Next slide, please, Rebecca.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what this is? Looks like a little bit like clover, but it isn't. It's wood sorrel. And what is this?
Mint.
Not mint.
Oh,
It stings if you touch it.
nettle.
Nettle. It's nettle. Yes. So
Eat all of those. Nettles are good.
yes. All of them are, well, the hairy bitter cress really doesn't unfortunately have a place sort of in medicinally, but all of them, what all of these have in common, they all, and those are all plants we start seeing coming up now. They all include what we call bitter principle, right? If you eat them, they're bitter, right? If you chew on a dandelion leaf, they're absolutely bitter. Nettle leaves are very, very bitter. I had some in my oatmeal this morning, right? And there's another one. We've sort of like bred this sensation, this taste for bitter, the way the food industry is just creating to us salt and sugar, right? And we're used to that. So that taste for bitter, we're like, ooh, what bitter does, and why we need bitter so importantly is they get our bile flowing. So our bile is produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and this is an important bile. We need a bile for digestion. What does bile, when we eat fat? Bile acts like dish detergent that you pour on something and it disperses the fat. It breaks down the fat in smaller molecules, so we can have an easier time digesting it, right? So all these plants, if you find them and if you know they were in your yard and it hasn't been sprayed, eat them, right? They're just wonderful allies to really help us on this connection. And
lower cholesterol.
yes, there is absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that today, but there are many, many wonderful plants that we really deliberately, therapeutically prescribe to. With cholesterol, what we want is we want a balance. We don't want to lower cholesterol. We want a balance between the high, the HDL, the good cholesterol, and the bad cholesterol. That's what we want. And that's what plants can absolutely help us do. Yeah. Next slide, please, Rebecca. This is just a little bit one-on-one on just because I know so many people hate dandelion in their yards. Dig it out and use the entire plant. You can use the entire plant. Is medicinal. You can there's liver health, there's kidney health, there's general cell protective health that comes from dandelion, right? You can buy these days dandelion leaves. People grow them and sell them. You can buy them at the farmer's market and in the store. It's just a fantastic plant. And I just always say, I don't want it all over my yard. So I dig it out and then I chop up the roots and I roast it and I make herbal coffee out of it and I eat the plants and put it in the salad or put it in the quiche or in the soup. And the flowers just are wonderful to just have in the food as well. Yes, you can eat the flowers. They are rich in yellow is always a sign for flavonoids, which is something that helps our cell to protect our cells from stress from too much oxidation. Right?
So you're not recommending changing the water to get rid of the bitterness when you're doing the leaves of that?
No, you want the bitterness. You want the
Right,
bitter.
this
You
is
need the
interesting.
bitter.
So
You need the
Joel
bitter.
Gibbons used to say, well, change the
We just
water.
need to get ourselves back used to including bitter and really for the taste of bitter and not just saying something's bad because it tastes bitter, something's actually good, because that's what then initiates all these processes in our body, right? Next slide, please. So let's do a quick on the communal level. So all these things we just talked about individually, they all matter for on the communal level. How do we feed our communities, right? How do we feed ourselves here in the church? I could go through our snack closet downstairs and basically tell you, I would really love for us to toss out the Oreos and the goldfish crackers and all of that, because they're really not meant to go into our bodies, and especially not into the bodies of our children and of our youth, right? How do we feed our family, neighbors, and community, right? And then there's this healing part of food. We all know this. Gathering, sitting around at a table together, that in and of itself is the most wonderful healing part. But if we can, on top of that, make it with food that we have a relationship to, we sort of get the double healing out of it, right? The importance of special occasion foods. This is just meant to sort of like put into connection. There are certain foods we're not meant to have all the time at our fingertips. And unfortunately, the food industry has changed that for us, right? So full disclosure, and Olivia knows this, I have an incredible hard time and I'm not signing up for distributing donuts to our youth every Sunday morning, right? When I was a kid, donuts were eaten once a year in these 3 days leading up to Ash Wednesday. They were a special treat. That's when the bakeries had them, right? And if you've ever made donuts yourself, you know why. Because it takes an incredible amount of time and love to make them. And if you want to make them with high quality fats, clarified butter, that's what's traditionally used. Go to the store and see the price for good quality clarified butter. Dunkin' Donuts is not using clarified butter, right? So this is that there's just certain things that where I'm just saying I would love to just have this consciousness and this awareness of, if we can, and always say we at Westminster can afford to feed ourselves better than we do, then why not go there, right? And then the idea of, well, how do my food choices and the way I shop for food affect those in my community and in the neighboring communities? This is just also something to have in mind. You know, the foods, if I can afford to buy, and organic is not the holy grail. That's just not the holy grail, but if we shop in a grocery store, it's the best choice we have, right? Unless you know the farmer and unless you buy from, I always prefer buying from a farmer, and it doesn't matter if he's certified organic or not, as long as I know the farmer and I know that they didn't use pesticides, right? But if you shop in the supermarket, that's the best choice you have. So if I choose not to buy the organic food, I'm indirectly voting for those in the communities. If you drive an hour west of here, we're in what we call the food deserts, where the grocery stores exist of gas stations and 7-Elevens, right? So we're also voting for these people never being able to afford anything that is a much higher quality food than what.
You recommend always choosing organic vegetables?
If you shop in the supermarket, yes. And there's something on your handouts that there's a link to the environmental working group. And they have something what they call, they give out that list of the dirty dozen and the clean 15. And the clean 15 are the veggies where they say, if you don't find them or don't want to buy them organically, those are the ones that are more okay for you to eat. And the dirty dozens are the ones where they say, if you don't find them, if you don't buy them organic, then just don't eat them. Strawberries, blueberries, they just are like sponges and they soak everything up, right? Next slide, please, Becca. Thank you. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to wrap, but I still have something for us. So on the earth level, and I'm happy to send you these slides so that you can ponder on them a little bit. And if we tie that then back into the earth and go back to these questions of that kinship of how do we treat the land? How do we work with the land where we grow the food, where the animals are raised, and the people who are working with them, right? How do we treat the farmers? How do we give back to the earth? And how do we do this in our own backyards, right? How do we interact with nature in our own backyards? Maybe we leave the leaf piles in our yards and allow the insects to have their eggs on there and overwinter like this, rather than removing them throughout the winter, and allow the leaves to break down and put nutrients into the soil rather than removing. Next slide, please. I want to come to the soil health part. So this is, if you're familiar with the Rodale Institute, I put a link on the resources as well. It's a wonderful resource. And the Rodale Jr. coined that term regenerative organic. And what that means is, organic just means farmers are not allowed to use XYZ. Regenerative agriculture is really the term that means we need to reestablish systems that are really healing for everyone involved, for all living beings involved. And it starts with the health of the soil, right? The soil, a healthy soil is rich in microorganisms, is rich in worms, is rich in plants that allow to take deep roots in there. And the term sustainability gets thrown around a lot. And I have a bit of a problem with it, because what sustainable means is keeping the status quo. If we keep the status quo as is, we are, so Rodale says we have 60 years left. The optimists say 80 years, pessimists say 50 years. The truth is somewhere in between. That's the number of years we have left to harvest something from the topsoil. After that, we're done. Yeah. If we keep up the way we approach farming and growing food globally, then that's what we have left. Okay. And so that turns, next slide, please. That comes into, again, developing this kinship. And developing this kinship and this idea that when we care for soils and when we create healthy soils by changing the way we farm, by not having monocrop after monocrop, big fields of wheat year after year after year, but changing the systems up, and also changing with that how we eat, right? Then we are creating a healthy system that really takes, again, this whole kinship of plant, animal, and land into it, right? And we can translate this to our backyards and church grounds. I mentioned this once in a meeting, you know, and I was told, well, we need our church lawn for the bouncy castle. And I said, we can have the bouncy castle in the parking lot. Imagine we turned our church lawn into a vegetable garden, a pollinator garden, where we can meet after worship and garden, young and old together. The preschoolers can dig in. We can have a built-in fire pit. We can still have our Easter Sunday service on the lawn. We can do all this, but we create a bit more of life around us, and also of life that heals us and feeds us. Next slide, please. And I just want to use the last 3.5 minutes, and I want to give her this voice. We can learn, it is really important in all of these ponderings to include and turn to indigenous wisdom and what is called traditional ecological knowledge. And we found in all corners of the world, indigenous wisdom and traditional ecological knowledge. And in this country, we go to the indigenous people of this country. And one of them being, if anyone has read Braiding Sweetgrass, it's in our library. It is, I said to Rebecca, it's the book I think is one of the most influential books of our time.
It's the women's group
It's
reading.
fantastic. That's fantastic. So Robin Waldkimmer, she's a professor, she's a botanist, biologist. She is a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. And it's a wonderful book. And I stopped talking and I just let her talk to the principle of the honorable harvest. It's a 3.5 minute video. want to, before the service starts, if you want to engage, if you want to have questions, if you want to ask me some questions, I'm here. You can also find me via email. Rebecca can share my email. If you have any interest of delving into that in more detail, or maybe looking at specific ways of what can we do, how can we use maybe herbal medicine or food as medicine in more detail, I'm super happy to maybe craft something for later at some point if there's any interest, and just going and having maybe like a little series or something where we just look into these things a little bit more, maybe outside of adult education, but in a different format. So I thank you wholeheartedly for your time. I made these printouts again, some journal prompts or ideas to ponder, and also just some resources where you can learn more about different ways of farming, different ways of connecting with the earth, and different ways of connecting with our food. So thank you for being here.